we're getting text messages from all our family at home going, can't find you. Thank you, that was our front row cornet section, playing Mr. Sandman for you, and it's a great fun little piece of music. Like I said, if you don't know the lyrics, look them up, they're really quite interesting. There's stuff about Liberace and all kinds of things. The next piece of music we're going to do is also a cornet solo. This features Rosalie O'Brien, and it is a piece by a lady named Florence Price, who wrote over 300 works, and probably not a name that comes to mind, but you might have heard some of her material. She was one of the first African-American composers that also happened to be an organist, and had like I said, about 300 compositions. And in 2009, they found a whole stack of things that had been in her summer cottage that had just been there, and they pulled them out and said, oh, this is her work. So this piece of music was originally written for organ, and it's been transcribed for cornet and brass band, and it's just a lovely little piece of music called Adoration. Isn't that a pretty piece of music? If you haven't heard of Florence Price before, check her out. There's all kinds of music that she wrote, a lot of it for organ, that is absolutely magnificent and very much in a late Romantic sort of style, early 20th century sort of stuff. It's really something. For those of you who are just arriving, welcome to Metropolitan. This is Metropolitan United Church. We are the Metropolitan Silver Band, and I was remiss earlier in saying, my name is Fran Harvey. I'm the director of this band. You can tell, because you get to see my back a lot. They don't. We promised that we would bring along music for everyone. So any Disney fans out there? Oh, there's got to be more than that. There's at least 200 of them in the band. So I'm a huge Disney fan. I think, you know, the animated movies are really interesting. They've been around since before I was born, which is kind of cool. And this particular one is one of my favorites. We're going to play the music about a young lady who has magical powers and is able to turn things into ice and snow. And it turns out to be not such a good thing sometimes, but in the end, it kind of sets you free to have something special about you that isn't what everybody wants you to have. And of course, really the whole story is about the most important thing is not what you have, but it's who you have. And it's about family and making it all work together. So this is highlights from Frozen. The dance floor is open if you feel the need. And some of you may feel the need to sing along. Don't do it at full voice because we'll change keys on you randomly, but feel free to, you know, enjoy. Thank you. Isn't that a fun piece of music? And I'm sure most of you were singing along. We have some more Disney later on for you, but right now we're going to do something that's kind of special for a brass band. Earlier you heard Rosalie play Adoration. You're about to hear a euphonium. And brass band is a unique instrumentation in that we have cornets, and instead of trumpets, we have tenor horns, which are just interesting instruments that are only used here. We use baritones and euphoniums, trombones, basses, two different kinds of basses, no waiting. But we have this euphonium. And in a concert band, if you were in a concert band somewhere in your early days, the euphonium plays a lot of bass things. In a brass band, the euphonium plays all the good bits. And that means you have to have stellar euphonium players. And so that means we have to give them lots to work on and some interesting things. So the piece of music, this is Dom, and he is going to play a piece of music called Pantomime that was written for one of the world's premier euphonium players. So that's who he's trying to emulate. He says, not me. And Dom is a University of Toronto student in engineering, and he also studies, obviously, to play the euphonium, and he plays just a beautiful piece for us. This is called Pantomime. It's a little different. It's kind of a different sort of style of music. You'll hear some really lovely melodies, and you'll hear some beautiful rhythmic playing, and you'll get to hear him do calisthenics on the euphonium. It's absolutely amazing. So this is Pantomime by the British composer Philip Spark. And that's what a euphonium can do. Well, if you have a euphonium player that can do it. Well done, Dom. That piece of music is one of the classic pieces written by Philip Spark, and it is quite a challenge for both the band and for Dom. So congratulations on doing that. Any Blue Jays fans out there? Good. They're playing right now. Don't tell me the score. I don't want to know. As long as Hoffman's not in, we're fine. I am a serious Blue Jays fan, but so are a number of us. And we have a piece of music that features not just, am I in the right order? Yes, I am. Yeah. Not just the Blue Jays, but it features one of my favorite people in the world. It features our nonagenarian. Hard to imagine that Bill Martin is 90, but he is. We celebrated his 90th birthday together a few months ago, March 1st. He actually turned 90 on February 28th. And Bill was a drama teacher as well as being a very fine cornet player, and now he plays tenor horn with us. He's been with the band for 73 years. Just 73. Clearly, he took his time getting to us. I played with the Oshawa Civic Band when he was a young man and such. So anyway, when he went to university, he came, and once you get here, you stay, apparently. So Bill is going to do for us one of my favorite pieces of music in the world, and it's kind of unique. It was written for us by our friend Ken Allen, who passed away last year at 95, and it is called Casey at the Bat.
Perfect. Lovely.
Oops, sorry. Don't have to work hard. This mic is quite low.
Okay.
Okay. Here we go.
Yeah.
Wait. I have to practice.
Oh, good. You're going to do wonderful.
Where is that? Wait a minute. I got to find one. Choose sandpaper. Okay, got it. Okay. There you
The outlook wasn't brilliant for the Mudville Nine that day. The score stood 4-2 with but one inning more to play. And then when Cooney died at first, and Barrows did the same, a sickly silence fell upon the patrons of the game. A straggling few got up to go in deep despair. The rest clung to that hope which springs eternal to the human breast. They thought if only Casey could but get a whack at that. Well, we put up even money now with Casey at the bat, but Flynn preceded Casey, as did also Jimmy Blake, and the former was a Lulu and the latter was a cake. So upon that stricken multitude grim melancholy sat, for there seemed but little chance of Casey's getting to the bat. But Flynn let drive a single, to the wonderment of all. And Blake, the much despised, tore the cover off the ball. And when the dust had lifted and the men saw what had occurred, there was Johnny safe at second and Flynn a hugging third. Then from 5,000 throats and more there rose a lusty yell. It rumbled through the valley. It rattled in the dell. It knocked upon the mountain and recoiled upon the flat, for Casey, mighty Casey, was advancing to the bat. There was ease in Casey's manner as he stepped into his place. There was pride in Casey's bearing and a smile on Casey's face. And then, when responding to the cheers, he lightly doffed his hat. No stranger in the crowd could doubt 'twas Casey at the bat. 10,000 eyes were on him as he rubbed his hands with dirt. 5,000 tongues applauded when he wiped them on his shirt. And while the writhing pitcher ground the ball into his hip, defiance gleamed in Casey's eye. A sneer curled Casey's lip. And now the leather-covered sphere came hurtling through the air. And Casey stood watching it in haughty grandeur there. Close by the sturdy batsman, the batman, the ball, unheeded, sped. That ain't my style, said Casey. Strike one, the umpire said. From the benches black with people, there went up a muffled roar, like the beating of the storm waves on a stern and distant shore.
Kill him! Kill the umpire!
Shouted someone from the stand. And it's likely they had killed him, had not Casey raised his hand with a smile of Christian charity. Great Casey's visage shone. He stilled the rising tumult. He bade the game go on. He signaled to the pitcher, and once more the spheroid flew. But Casey still ignored it. And the umpire said, strike two. Tried the maddened thousands, and echo answered. But one scornful look from Casey in the audience was awed. They saw his face grow stern and cold. They saw his muscles strain. And they knew that Casey wouldn't let that ball go by again. The sneer is gone from Casey's lip. His teeth are clenched in hate. He pounds with cruel violence his bat upon the plate. And now the pitcher holds the ball. And now he lets it go. And now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow. Oh, somewhere in this favored land, the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light. And somewhere men are laughing, and somewhere children shout. There's no joy in Midville. Mighty Casey has struck out. Well done, the audience, too.
My, what a great audience. We don't often get our audience participation like that. Well done, folks. I will reiterate for you, for our visitors, anybody who's just arrived, we are the Metropolitan Silver Band. We are here at Metropolitan United Church, where we have been for the last 92 years. In 1934, a group of gentlemen left the Salvation Army and came looking for a place to play. And during the summers, they used to go outside on the front lawn and do our services outside. And there was, it's hard to get the organ outdoors. So there was just congregational singing, and they said, "Oh, would you like a band?" And the folks at Metropolitan said, "Oh, that'd be great. We'll give that a try." And they played all summer, every service. And then in the fall, they said, "Would you like to come inside?" And we've been here ever since. We're musicians. We know a good thing when we see it. And speaking of good things, one of the pieces that we would like to play for you now is a really great piece of music. This is written by Paul Lovett Cooper, a British composer. He writes music for brass band, for both religious purposes and because he's part of the Salvation Army, but also for just great musical purposes. And this particular piece of music is one that we just absolutely love to play. So anytime we can bring it out, and it's one that I think you will really enjoy. It is a piece called Dark Side of the Moon. It's not that Dark Side of the Moon for those of you who are, rock and roll fans, sorry. It's called Dark Side of the Moon. He and his father, very close, and they used to have long conversations about, the interesting things in life. Like, I wonder what the other side of the moon looks like. And as of Artemis II, we now know, which is kind of cool. So it brings this piece kind of forward into our time frame. He wrote this a few years ago. And so it depicts what he thinks might be on the far side of the moon, on the dark. So you will hear some dark and interesting things, and then you'll hear some just beautiful melodies and some really fun motion in it as well, because I think he thinks that the moon is full of life, and it very well may be. So this is Paul Lovett Cooper, Dark Side of the Moon. Who says that classical music isn't fun? That was Dark Side of the Moon by Paul Lovett Cooper. If you haven't heard of Paul Lovett Cooper before, look him up online. There's all kinds of recordings of his material. Every piece of music he's ever written is really something. And one that we did not too long ago for actually Fancha and Andrew's wedding was Fire in the Blood. If you get a chance to watch that one, whew, that's a really fun one as well. We're just about at the end of our time, so that there will be other things going on. And again, we're the Metropolitan Silver Band. I'm Fran Harvey. We've been here for 92 years. Well, not today, although it was early today. And welcome to Met if you're just visiting us. If you haven't been here before, please check us out. We're online every Sunday here, as well as every time that the band performs, we live stream and record. So you can find us online at metband.ca or Facebook under Metropolitan Silver Band or YouTube. We have our own channel with a whole bunch of things we did during the pandemic. No guarantees on the quality, but they were done at home, and boy, oh boy, was that a challenge for all of us, and it was really something that they did that. We will leave you today. I promised you some more Disney, because why not? So there's another more recent animated film that many of you have probably seen, is one called Encanto. The music is by Lin-Manuel Miranda, which is just, or Lin-Manuel Miranda, sorry. Paul Lovett Cooper, got him in my head. Just amazing music. The story of Encanto, I promised them I wouldn't tell you the whole story. It's a magical house, it's a magical family. They all have gifts, and they bring that to their community, and the community comes to rely on them. And then things start to fall apart a little bit, because things aren't quite as smooth as they thought it would be. And in the end, if you haven't already seen it, I won't spoil it, but in the end, we all know that the most important things are family and caring for each other as a community, which is what we do here at Metropolitan as much as we can on a daily basis. So thank you for coming today. Enjoy the rest of Doors Open. The good news is it's warm inside. I don't think it is outside, but hopefully it stopped raining for you if you're on your way to the next venue. Thank you for coming to see us today, and we leave you with the music from Encanto. Thanks so much for coming today. Jonathan will be demonstrating the organ once we move the band out of the way. And there's carillon tours. There are artifacts in the back, in the chancel room behind us. There are all the beautiful stained glass windows, and of course our Morceau paintings, which are absolutely magnificent to see. Thank you for coming today, and enjoy the rest of Doors Open.
sound something like this. Actually, even higher. With apologies to any dogs in the room. So those are very, very, very small. And then the biggest pipes in the organ are in the bass. And yeah, exactly. You can't actually hear the fundamental because the fundamental of that note is 16 hertz. And our normal hearing threshold is around 20 hertz, so we can actually perceive a fundamental. So what you're hearing is the overtones and you're feeling the sound pressure, but you're not actually, your ears aren't hearing it. The other thing is none of us standing here could physically hear it because the wavelength is about 64 feet. And so it doesn't propagate until you're about 3 or 4 rows back in the pews there. So even if you could hear 60 hertz, you wouldn't be able to hear it until it's there because it's not sounding here, which is really neat. That pipe is about this big by this big, made out of wood, and it looks something like this, except that it's that big by that big by about 36 feet long. So it's absolutely monstrous. And if you're standing, it's up in the back of this chamber against the back wall. So if you're standing next to it when it's playing, it's not really that loud, but you can actually, from the sound pressure when you're close, you feel your head and your innards compressing. It's really neat sensation. So, in terms of the organ and how it makes sound, you can see on the back wall there are some pipes in the facade. And those are only a few of the pipes in the instrument, but they look like this. For those of you who have recorder playing knowledge, what happens with the pipes is they're all sitting on boxes of compressed air called wind chests. And so when you push a key, you open a valve underneath the pipe, and that allows the air to go into the body of the pipe. And inside here, you can see there's a little metal plate. And that metal plate forces the air against the upper lip of the pipe. And then it's split there, and you get a vibrating air column inside the pipe, and that can make a sound. So you can make the pitch lower by moving this slide. To make the pipe longer, you get a longer wavelength, lower frequency, lower pitch. This one has had a hard life, so I don't think it's going to speak for me, but oh, yeah. So that's more or less what happens. So that the sort of normal organ tone is that. So it sounds something like this. Sorry. So that's a set of those usual normal organ pipes. This organ's a bit unusual in that we have real surround sounds. So the pipes are in the chambers on that side, the chambers out here, and also in the two cases of the back wall. So we can play back and forth between front back. And then going to the other side. So it's a really pretty neat original surround sound before Dolby. Dolby. So if you look a little more closely here, you'll see that all of the stops have numbers on them. Some of them say 8, some say 4, some say 16, some say 2, some say 32. And that refers to the pitch. So if you have an 8-foot set of pipes, that speaks at unison. So if you play middle C here, that's the same as middle C on the piano. But if you have a 4-foot set of pipes, it's 1 octave higher, 2-foot, 2 octaves higher, 16-foot, 1 octave below, 32, 2 octaves below. And that number comes from the bottom C, because the bottom C pipe from that set of pipes will be 8 feet long, depending on the diameter and all that. So you see an 8-foot principal set of pipes in the front of the cases back there. And you wonder, how match sounds. And the organ is like the original synthesizer, so you can add and combine all these different sets of pipes to get that characteristic organ sound. So if I take my 8-foot sound, I can add to it. So 8-foot, add 4-foot, add 2-foot, add 16-foot, add some mutations. And that's how you get the really characteristic kind of wood organ sound. And it's by adding all of these overtones and undertones to to a set of notes. Now, the other thing about the organ that's really different from the piano is that it's very binary. The notes are on or off, and once you play a note, it's just always going to be the same. And it won't get louder or softer. On the piano, you can use more higher velocity attack, you'll get a louder sound, but it starts to decay right away because it's a vibrating string. But on the organ, you're opening a valve underneath the pipe, and it's just air going through the pipe. So as long as you keep your finger there, or however one doesn't fail you, that sound is going to stay. So the organ has, this kind of an organ anyway, has some mechanical devices that allow us to game the system a bit and pretend that we can do things dynamically. So if you look behind there, at the screen, behind the screen, you'll see the shutters opening and closing. So if I have pipes that are inside there and have the shutter closed, it's a way of creating mechanical crescendo and decrescendo. And this organ has 4 sets of pipes, 4 divisions of pipes that are in enclosures. So you can do crossfading between things, you can bring things on underneath another sound. For instance, if I do something like this, and you'll notice the box and the add. I'm going to close the box. So you can actually make a quite seamless crescendo up and down by using these swell enclosures. They're called swell boxes. You use them a little bit like you use the clutch when you're driving a standard, so that you can shift gears smoothly. And so you have to time it well so that you close just enough so that you hide the bump of the new stops coming on and set the pipes being added. So there's a little bit of a trick of timing to know when to have your feet in the right place. As my harpsichord teacher, Colin Tilley, said, you really have to know where your fingers are when you're playing this, because there are many ways you can go very badly wrong in short order. If you're going to play some of the loudest sounds on the organ, if you play a sound like that in a performance, you're really committed. You can't pretend it didn't happen. It's there. So I had a terrible experience like that playing also Strauss, Strauss's big symphonic poem for organ and orchestra, with an orchestra I won't name. And unfortunately, it was in the dress rehearsal, not the performance. But I was very tired and very jet lagged having gone there. And of course, you know, in the beginning of the first section, there's a huge organ chord after about 382 measures or so that you have to play. And you haven't really done anything for 275 bars. So you're counting and counting and concentrating. And then you've done it, but I was really tired and I was hitting the deep drops, which, you know, that happens. So I didn't want to set up the registration, have the stops drawn and with a loud sound when I had those deep drops. So I waited to do that until just before I had to play, but I was tired and I forgot to push the button. And I was on it, I yelled, I was all over the engine, boom, and there was no sound. Dreadful with the whole orchestra right there. So anyway, don't forget to push the button, that's the other thing. These buttons, you might wonder what those are all for. As you see, there are many, many stops and many kinds of sounds, and it's not really practical to change 124 of them with 2 hands all at once if you want to change quickly. So you can pre-program combinations of sounds. Here. of them are just for stops in a particular keyboard. Some of them are for the whole organ, like these. So everything changes at once. So again, you have to plan what you're going to do before you start doing it. You want to look at the map before you leave home because it's not good to not plan these things out so well. In terms of the other kinds of pipes in the organ, we talked about the open ones. If you take one of those open pipes and put a stopper in, you get a sound that's one octave lower than you would expect from looking at the length of the pipe. So this pipe, these are 8-foot stops, open pipes, but this is also an 8-foot stop. But at a stop pipe, what do you notice about the sound compared to? About that is that it becomes a very good blending kind of sound, so you can add it to a different sound without really changing the nature. So if you've got your string and you add a flute, it kind of thickens it, a bit like adding starch to sauce without fundamentally changing the flavor of that sauce. So it makes a very good companion kind of sound. So those two kinds of pipes, the stop and the open flute pipes, account for about 3/4 of pipes in the organ. The other quarter are what we call reed pipes. Now, for all of our clarinetists and oboists and saxophonists in the room, this will look quite familiar to you. Essentially, what we have here is a brass cane, a brass reed that's open. It's a cylinder that's open on one side, and there's a brass tongue that sits on top of it. So when the air comes into the bottom of the pipe, and that tongue has a very slight curve to it. So when the air comes into the bottom of the pipe, goes into the shallot, of course, and up the bottom of the pipe, but that draws the tongue toward the shallot because of the suction. And then it springs back because of the brass spring tension going the other way. And so you set up this oscillation of the tongue and it starts vibrating back and forth. And you get a pattern of negative and positive air pressure pulses inside the body of the pipe, and that's what gives you the sound from a reed pipe. Same thing that happens in a clarinet or a saxophone. And you can change the frequency of the pipe by making the tongue longer or shorter than the string wire. So the longer the tongue, the deeper the frequency, the lower the frequency. And the sound of that will be affected by the shape and weight of the tongue, how much wind pressure it's on, what the shape is of the body. So if you have a sort of normal conical shaped resonator, you'll get a trumpet tone, something like this. But if you make it a little bit narrower and really snappy, you'll get something like this. If you make it very wide and put a stopper in the top of it, you'll get a kind of French horn sound. And if you make it a cylinder instead of a cone, you'll get a very strong 12th overtone. And if you put it on extremely high wind pressure and do other things to it, you get that. And if you make it about 32 feet long, you get that. So, and those pipes, the 32-foot reed is absolutely amazing. The tongue for that is about 16 inches long, and it's made out of brass. It's about 1.5 inches wide, and the curve in the tongue has to be perfectly parabolic, and it has to be perfectly flat relative to the shallot, or you won't see. And Then there's also a little set of bells at the back called a Zimbelstern, and you can see the little star turning, which is very Christmassy. The other thing is we don't have, normally, as you heard, there isn't really vibrato. But there are two ways you can get vibrato. One is this. And that's a little diaphragm that's put in line some of the loudest sounds. Just as we leave, the quietest sound on the organ is this. Which is just up behind you. Shutters are closed with the shutters open. It'll get that loud, but it's pretty discreet. So there we are. Any questions? Yes. In any case, it makes a lot of noise if it's engaged. If you'd like to have a closer look at the console,
Good afternoon, Metropolitan United Church, and thank you for joining us for Doors Open 2026. I hope everyone's having a good time up there with Jonathan and our wonderful Cassavant organ. For those of you who are interested, our carillonniste is currently performing and on the bells, and you're more than welcome to step out on the front lawn and enjoy that offering from that very special and very unique instrument. For those who have registered for the 3:15 tower climb, now would be a good time to start making your way to the South Lobby Narthex area. The tour group is full, but we are adding names to a list of optimistic waitlisters for those who are interested. Thank you again for visiting.
then you can, these are called couplers. So if you have, they're called couplers. So you have, let's say you have this sound, it's up in here, but you want to get it to play it together with, say, this sound in the middle keyboard. So together, then you can use what's called swell to break. Yeah, so you can transfer the sounds
Good afternoon, Metropolitan United, and welcome to day 2 of Doors Open 2026. We have up at the north end of the sanctuary our wonderful Minister of Music, Dr. Jonathan Oldengarm, who will be playing some music on the pipe organ and doing a little bit of a demo. So if you would like to be part of that, please make your way to the north end of the sanctuary.
Welcome everyone. It's good to see you. First question: how And so what we get here is the original synthesizer game, because you can mix and match. So it's 8-foot, add a 4, add a 2, add a 16, add some compound spots, and you get the really classic kind of organ. Very rich kind of sound, but that's how that happens, is by stacking all of these overtones on top of each other. Our ears play very interesting tricks on us that way too. So if we build a sound, starting with C, 8-foot C, and a 4-foot, and a 12, 2 octaves, now on a 17, you hear that as a chord. Are we still hearing it as a chord? In order to all the time to enrich things and trick our ears and think we hear things. We aren't. The opposite happens at the bottom end of the acoustic spectrum. So if we take a 16-foot and add a note that's a fifth above it, if we start going down the scale, by the time you get there, your ear is filling in the blanks and is hearing it as the second and third harmonics of a fundamental that's 1 octave lower. So there's a combination tone of your ear doing this sort of trick on you, which again is using Nordendoling to reinforce sounds and enrich things without having to build a very large device and also different color possibilities. If you take these open pipes and make them very, very narrow in proportion to their length, so something more like this, but even a bit narrower, you end up with less and less fundamental in proportion to the overtones. So if you make it a little bit narrow, you're going to get something like this, a little bit narrower still, and if you make it extremely narrow, then another quarter of the pipes in the organ are what are called reed pipes. And now this is where we appeal to our clarinets, our oboists, and our saxophonists. In the clarinet, of course, you have a plastic mouthpiece or bone or rosewood, whatever. And then there's a cane, but in the organ pipe, it's all made out of brass. So there's a brass tongue that's sitting on an open tube that's open on one side, made of brass. And that tongue fits very precisely on there. And it has a very slight curve away from the shout. So what happens when you let the air into the bottom of the pipe is that this tongue, the air passes into the shout, of course, that's a big hole, and it pulls the tongue against the shout and seals it. But then because it's made of brass and it's got a bit of a curve and a big spring, it springs back out, but then it's gone back into the vacuum and then it springs back out and oscillates. And so that frequency, that oscillation of negative and positive pressure inside the body of the pipe is what gives you the sound from a reed pipe. And you can change the frequency by making the tongue longer or shorter. So if you move this tuning wire up or down, move it up a little bit like this, you'll see that the tongue gets longer. And because it's longer, it'll vibrate more slowly, so you get a lower frequency. I don't know if this one is good for me. It doesn't have a resonator on it, so it sounds a bit like a kazoo. But if you put the resonator on it, in a normal kind of reed pipe, it's a long cone, and it'll sound kind of trumpet-like. If you make that extremely wide, in scale, very heavy construction, very high ring pressure, you'll get something like this. Really quite powerful. If you make it pretty spicy and make the resonators out of brass instead of the lead zinc, and make the tongue a certain shape, you can get an orchestral trumpet. And if you make it about 32 feet long, in that, those reed pipes are absolutely amazing. The reed is like the one that I showed you, but the tongue is about 16 inches cymbal sharon or a cymbal star, and often use it at Christmas, special nights and so on. Toy stop. And then we also have a what's called a harp, which looks essentially like a big vibraphone on its side. Which is really cute. The other thing is, you may have noticed that all of the sounds are quite steady, but we can create a drop
Good afternoon, Metropolitan United Church, and welcome to day 2 of Doors Open 2026. In 5 minutes, we will be starting an organ demonstration at the front of the church. So if you are interested in learning about Canada's largest pipe organ, please make your way to the north of the sanctuary, where we will begin that demonstration shortly. Good afternoon, Metropolitan United, and welcome to day 2 of Doors Open 2026. We will now be starting our organ demonstration on Canada's largest pipe organ with our Minister of Music, Dr. Jonathan Oldengarn. If you are interested in participating in the demo, please come up to the front. Don't be shy, you can come up the steps and sit in the choir stalls as well. So come give it a listen.
Oh, it is working now. It wasn't before. That's great. Excellent. Good. That'll save me from shouting, which I've been doing for the last 3 demonstrations. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you all. If you'd like to come up toward the front where you can see the console a little better, you're more than welcome. It doesn't usually bite, and I don't either. But yeah, as you wish. So first, sort of general knowledge question. How many pianists do we have in the room? Bunch of you? Good, good, good. Any pianists back there? Yeah. What about clarinetists or oboists or saxophonists? Yeah, good, good. What about flautists or recorder players? Any of those? A few wind players. Good, good, good. These are all good complementary skills and knowledge to have. So the thing that the piano and the organ have in common is that they both have keys. And they're usually about 12 notes per octave or so. But even with the pipe organ, that's not always the case. When you get in historic instruments, sometimes you can have sub-semitones as well. But that's another conversation. The big difference between the piano and the organ is that when we play the piano, as soon as you've pressed a note, a hammer strikes a string and the string starts vibrating. But as soon as the hammer has hit the string, the sound starts to attenuate because of inertia. The string stops vibrating eventually. So the sound is always getting quieter after each attack, and we can control the beginning of the attack, make it louder or softer, but we're always focused on the attack, the beginning of the sound, because that's where we have the most control. With the organ, until I release the note or Hydro 1 fails us, that note is going to stay forever, and it's going to stay the same volume. So with playing the organ and thinking about it as a musical medium, we're always thinking about the release and how we release notes. So if I play this, you really have no idea which is the important note in the phrase, but if I play, it's really clear where the accents are, but I'm doing that only by controlling exactly when the notes are released. So certain notes are released a bit earlier in order to create a perceived accent on the next note. So it's a bit of a smoke and mirrors game. We're using a 2-dimensional medium to project the image of a whole 3-dimensional metrical structure and so on. So organ playing is really all about smoke and mirrors and illusion. Okay, next trivia question. How many pipes do you think are in this organ? Good call. Safe call. Any more specific guesses? I hear 1,000. Anybody raise me 1,500? 7,800? Well, that's a little ambitious. We're actually about 8,300 and change, so somewhere between 8,300 and 8,400 pipes. The smallest pipes in the instrument are about the size of a pencil, and they sound something like this. With apologies to any canines present. Then the biggest pipes in the instrument are about 18 inches by 18 inches cross section and about 36 feet long or so, and they look like this except the much, much, much bigger cousin to this pipe, made out of wood as well, and the bottom C of that sounds like this. So if there are any hardcore physics nerds who want to do some quick calculations, what do you think the fundamental frequency is of that note? Exactly, 16 hertz. 16, exactly. Well done. Yeah, so we can't actually hear it. It's below that fundamental is below our hearing threshold. And the other thing is that we wouldn't, even if we could hear 16 hertz, really we couldn't physically hear it here because that wavelength is 64 feet long and it won't propagate until you're about 3 or 4 rows of pews back out there. But what you can hear from here is the overtones, and you can feel the sound pressure. No, exactly. It's, I mean, the columns act like baffles, and also the roof, the coffered ceiling breaks things up too, so we don't get a lot of standing waves. It's quite, I mean, there are always going to be hot and cold sections acoustically at any frequency in any room, but it's surprisingly even when you go through the space. The one thing about the room, again, if you're a bit of an architecture and physics nerd like me, is that the walls are plaster and lath, and the ceiling is hardwood but not strapped very heavily, so it is a little bit of a bass trap, so we lose more bass frequency than you would think from looking at the room visually. And the organ is voiced to compensate for that as well, so the bass is heavier than it would need to be if it were, say, a masonry or stone structure, so that it sounds more frequency even out there. But little parentheses there. No, I can nerd out terribly about these things, but I'll stay on script here. If you look closely at these draw stops here, you'll see that a lot of them have numbers with them. They'll be either 8 or 4 or 2 or 16, 32 in a few cases. And that refers to the pitch, what octave the pipes are speaking in. So if I play middle C on an 8-foot stop, that'll be the same as middle C on a piano, a unison. But if I play it on a 4-foot stop, it'll be an octave higher. On a 2-foot stop, 2 octaves higher, 16-foot, an octave lower. And so the organ really serves as the original, like the original synthesizer. You can combine these things by mixing and matching groups of pipes. So I'm going to just demonstrate for a minute. Now if I add a 4-foot to that, and then a 2-foot, and then 16, and then compound stops, you get the really characteristic kind of pipe organ sound, which is a whole bunch of parallel fifths and octaves, but our ears combine them all into one big set of overtones over a fundamental, so we don't hear it as fifths and octaves. You can demonstrate this by building a sound as follows. Again, I'm just going to add 8-foot, 4-foot, 2 2/3, which is sounding a 12th above, 2-foot, which is sounding a 15th above, and then a 1 3/5, which is a 17th above. And you'll hear that we build a chord on the lowest note, but then I'm going to go up the scale chromatically, kind of quickly, and you'll hear that about halfway up the keyboard, all of a sudden your ear is going to do the equivalent of magic eye, and you'll hear it as one rich compound tone and not 5 separate pitches anymore. So you can hear the triad really convincingly here, still here. Still a little bit here, but now. So our ears do amazing things to us with melding these sounds into one acoustic entity, even though objectively you know it isn't, but your ear has put it all together. The same thing happens at the low end of the frequency. If you play a fundamental and then add a fifth above it, like this, here's the fundamental and the fifth above, and I'm going to go down the scale slowly, and what you will hear is by the time we get to the bottom, your ear is going to put that together. Now by the time we get down here, what your ear is telling you is that you're hearing the second and third harmonics of a fundamental that's actually an octave below that. So it's a combination tone that's tricked your ear into thinking you're hearing something you aren't, because you can't actually hear the fundamental because that fundamental is 16 hertz. So it's a really interesting acoustic phenomenon that happens. Now most of the pipes in the organ are what are called principal or diapason pipes. So we see a bunch of them on the back wall there in the facade. And they look like this. And the way they make sound is that all of the pipes are standing on boxes of pressurized air. And when you push a key or put a note down, it opens a little valve underneath the pipe and it allows that pressurized air to go into the body of the pipe. Now here's where our expertise from our recorder players comes in, because inside this pipe there's a little metal plate called a languid. And that metal plate, that languid, directs the wind stream up against the upper lip of the pipe here, and it creates a vibrating air column in the pipe body. Like that. And you can make the frequency of the pipe, you can make the wavelength longer by lengthening the pipe, which makes the frequency lower, so you get a lower pitch from a longer pipe. So if I push this tuning slide like so at the highest point, but then if I move it out a bit, like so, it'll be about a semitone lower. And like that. So that's how you tune the instrument, but also how you differentiate pitch to pitch. If I take that pipe and put a stopper in the end of it, any of our hardcore physics people here know what happens to the sound. I'll show you acoustically what it sounds like. These are open pipes. And these are stop pipes. Whoops, sorry. Any comments on the difference between the two? What do you hear? Yeah. Similar. Yeah. Yeah. So what's happening is that in the open pipe, the wavelength ends open because it's going to the top of the pipe body and going out. But if you put a stopper in it, it ends with a node and it doubles back on itself. And so half of the harmonics cancel because they're interfering with each other inside the pipe body. So you hear, in an open pipe, you hear all of the harmonics, first, second, third, etc. And in a stop pipe, you only hear half of them. You hear the first, the third, the fifth, the seventh, the ninth, and so on. And so it sounds to our ear more like a pure sine wave, as opposed to having all of that harmonic development. And the practical thing about that is that those stop pipes become very good blenders. You can combine them with other sets of pipes that'll reinforce the sound without really changing the nature of it. So it's a bit like adding starch to a sauce to thicken it. You know, you won't change the flavor of your Alfredo sauce, but if you don't want it to be runny, you just put some starch in. So let's say we've got our open pipes here, and then we add a stopped pipe to it. Just makes it kind of richer and fuller without really fundamentally changing the color. You can do the same with a reed pipe especially. So let's say I have my trumpet here. So they're very good companion stops, shall we say, in that sense, in addition to having a beautiful quality of their own. If we take those open principal pipes like this and make them very narrow in proportion to their length, then we'll get less and less fundamental and more overtone. So these are of moderate dimension, but if I make it pretty narrow, so you hear that there's more and more brilliance to the sound. If I make it extremely narrow, get a very string-like sound. And then if I make it extremely wide, it becomes almost flute-like because there's so much fundamental in proportion to the overall sound envelope. So those stops, the principals, the flutes, and the strings account for about 3/4 of the stops in the instrument. Then the other quarter of them are called reeds, and this is where the expertise of our clarinetists will come in. So inside a reed pipe, you'll see something like what you see on a clarinet mouthpiece. And a clarinet, of course, that would be made out of hardwood. It's an open tube, open on one side with a reed against it. And a clarinet, that's made out of cane, but in an organ, this is all made out of brass. So when the air comes into the toe hole of the pipe, this reed also has a slight curve away from the shallot, away from that tube. And so the air goes into the tube because that's where it can go in the sealed body. And it creates a little vacuum and it pulls the tongue against the shallot. But then because the tongue is made out of brass and curved away, it springs back. but then it's drawn back in by the vacuum again, and then it starts to oscillate back and forth. And so you get a series of positive and negative air pressure pulses inside the pipe body, and that's what makes the sound inside the reed pipe body. And you can make that go faster or slower, so higher or lower frequency, by moving this tuning wire up and down. So if you make the tongue longer, it goes at a lower frequency, and if you make it shorter, it's a higher frequency. And the color of the sound is really determined by the weight of the tongue, the curve, and also the shape of the pipe body. So if it's a normal conical sort of pipe body, you'll get a trumpet sound. But if you make it a cylinder, you get a very strong overtone of a 12th. If you make it really, really short in proportion to its length, you get a kind of vox humana, and those pipes look like this. So they're very, very short in proportion to their speaking pitch. So you get less fundamental, more overtone. If you make them really, really loud and really heavy construction, really wide, you get a tuba. So that's quite present. And if you make it really brassy and put it on the opposite wall of the church, you get some surround sound. Now, the other thing about the organ, as I said at the beginning, it's binary. So the notes are either on or off, unlike the piano, where you've got some control over the dynamic level. So we have a couple of mechanical devices to get around that. And if you look here, and you'll see at the console, there are these chrome pedals here. So there are shutters. So if And there are 4 sets of those enclosures on this instrument in different parts of the church for different sets of pipes and so on. So you can crossfade between them. You can use one. I'll demonstrate how you can make a crescendo that's really quite seamless by adding stops and using the swell shutters cleverly. You can make a really seamless kind of orchestral crescendo just by using that. So you use the swell pedal a little bit like the clutch when you're driving a standard. So you avoid speed shifting and keep a very smooth ride all the way up and down. But getting the timing of that right is a bit of a trick. So yeah. Yes. The pipes? Yeah, so each different sound, and yeah, so as I was saying, they're spread around the room in different places and so on. I'll close by playing a piece that's very well known. It's probably the most famous organ piece that Bach may or may not have written, and it's been covered by everybody the last 276 years or so. But I think it's fantastic, and it really does show off the instrument. I'm going to play it in a very symphonic kind of way, which wouldn't have been possible on an instrument of Bach's time, which was much more classical, all mechanical. This one has a lot more bells and whistles. The basic principles of how the pipes are constructed, how they work together, and so on. It's really 15th century technology, and quite incredible what all they had figured out back in that time. And we're still reaping the benefits of it today. So here we are with Bach to end. The switching between here and the chambers is electronic, but everything else about it is acoustic and original. So in 1930, of course, when the instrument was built, that would have been electromechanical and pneumatic relays. So now the switching is all digital, because that system, after 80 years, gave up the ghost, and we had to replace it with digital. Yeah, I started here in September 2022. The thing is, with playing the organ, every single organ is different. And if you go around playing a lot of recitals, as I do, you really have to see what's in front of you, figure out exactly how you're going to do it. So it's constant problem solving, and usually problem solving in the instant, because even if you've been promised 6 hours of practice time in a place, you can be quite sure that somebody will be vacuuming for half of that time, and the altar guild will be arranging flowers for the other half, and then it won't be available because it's been double booked for a wedding reception or something. So you just have to be able to come in there and have a plan, ready to go, and just figure it out. Now, with an instrument like this, you can do that. You can, there's a very simple game plan. It's a very large instrument, but the core of it is actually very standard Anglo-American romantic. So if you know that kind of instrument well, that style of instrument, you know what to do. It's just a much expanded version of that. But to really, really understand the instrument and really get to know it intimately, I have to say I'm still discovering new things every day, new combinations that I hadn't thought of before, hadn't noticed, new ways of using it, new ways of understanding how it works in the room under all sorts of different circumstances. Because of course, if you put 800 people in here, the instrument is going to sound very different and behave very differently. If the ensemble is here compared to the ensemble being out on the steps, what you do with balance is going to be very, very different. So there are just an infinite number of things to learn about how the instrument works in the room, how it is on its own terms. Yeah, it's constant lifelong learning, which makes it a lot of fun and very rewarding. Because you've never really learned how to play the organ. You continue to learn how to play the organ. And then every now and then you come to an instrument that really, really, really knocks you on your back and you think, ooh, I underestimated that one, and it's a teachable moment. So yeah. Especially playing in Europe a lot when you play historic instruments. Because for these kind of early 20th century North American instruments, the number of keys is relatively the number of keyboards will vary, of course, from 2 to 5, but the number of pedal keys is either 30 or 32, and usually roughly the same shape. But with historic instruments in Europe, it can truly be anything, not necessarily a complete octave in the bass for 17th century instruments and earlier, not necessarily the same compass at the top, differing number of keys, very differing dimensions of the keys. They can be very wide, they can be very narrow. The pedal board can be very wide, very narrow. And you don't usually learn the full extent of that until you get there for your first practice session, which is usually the day of or the day before the concert. So sometimes there can be Maalox-inducing evenings of thinking about how to solve problems, but it's always interesting though, and always varied and beautiful. So yes. I started piano when I was about 6 and organ at about 12 or so. So yeah. I still play piano. I work on piano a lot. Technically, it's just, especially with playing romantic music and 20th century music, a lot of it is really conceived for the piano action, and the technique is very similar to piano technique. If I'm working on 18th century music and earlier, I do a lot of work on the harpsichord, as well as the organ. Because again, the way of using the hand and the way of thinking about the sound and so on is much more related to that. So, and you hear different things in the texture when you play something on the harpsichord or on the piano versus the organ. So I think the more different ways you can find to hear the music differently, you notice different things about the texture, become aware of it differently, and it's really very important. Yeah. Yes. 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 Yeah. So that's partly a question of historical style. Obviously, before electric power and electric wind supplies and so on, the pressures were generally lower, because if you had your poor kid pumping away on the treadles there, you didn't want to have to generate very high wind pressure, because even a group of boys with ADD have limits to what they can physically generate for a sustained period of time. So the pressure in earlier instruments tends generally to be a little bit lower, or instruments influenced, even modern instruments influenced by earlier building practices, tends to be a bit lower. So in organ terms, it's usually expressed in terms of millimeters of wind or inches of wind. So for early instruments, you'd generally be in the 2.5 to 3.5 inch range as far as wind pressure. On this instrument, because it's late Romantic, a bit beefier, so the wind pressure for most of this set of pipes for the grate, that's on about 4.5 or so, 5 inches of wind in that range. In the choir division, it's a little bit lower. It's probably more like 4. For the reeds in the grate, it's significantly higher. They're on about 10 inches. The orchestral division here is on quite high, especially the reeds. They're on more like 15. So you hear on the high pressure, the attack becomes quite snappy and quite direct. Everything's getting forced a lot more. So you get a stronger fundamental, but also more possibility for different, really quite sharp attacks. And then the high pressure tubas up here are on very, very high wind pressure. They're on 25 inches. So they're pretty stentorian. If you put them all together, the tuning is a little bit off right now because of the weather, but it's impressive enough to hear. And you can only hear this in 2 places in Canada, one being St. Paul's Bloor Street and the other being here. So that's only 4 sets of pipes, but because of the very high wind pressure and the very large scale and so on, it's amazingly present and loud. Yeah, so that would be about the range. Yeah. Yes. Yes and yes. There's a very thick book by Bruce Haynes, who is a wonderful musicologist in Montreal, and it's called Diapason. And it's all about the history of standard pitch and all the different standards everywhere, which varied even from village to village sometimes. So for instance, in Bach's 2 jobs, in Weimar and then he went to Leipzig. In Weimar, the organ was pitched high and it was called chortone, about a semitone above modern concert pitch, and the orchestra strings and winds played in Kammerton, which is low pitch, about A415, about a semitone below our modern concert pitch. So the organ would always transpose down by full tone to match the pitch of the orchestra. But in his first job in Weimar, the organ was at high pitch and the woodwinds were at low pitch, but the strings were also at high pitch. So it was a dog's breakfast of different pitches and pitch standards and so on, even then. And a lot of those historic instruments are still at their original pitches, so we can actually learn a lot about different local customs. Also with historical oboes and so on, when they're in museums or flutes, it's very easy to tell what the original pitch was because they're not really movable. With string instruments, of course, you can tune up and down much more readily, and it's harder to tell what the original intended setup was. Harpsichords, you can tell quite precisely if there are original strings because of the string scaling. Strings will start to break if you push the pitch too high, so you can tell that there's a limit, or there'll be too much tension on the case and the instrument will fail. So this organ was always at A440 when it was built in 1930, but there are Casavant instruments from this exact period, like the one at Trinity St. Paul's, for instance, on Bloor Street, where Tafelmusik performs, which is about the same period, maybe a year earlier than this one, and that one was tuned originally and is still tuned at about 436. So it's significantly below modern concert pitch, to the grief of everybody who tries to do an organ and piano concert there, because you can't really tune a modern piano down that low and have it still sound good. So even in North America, as recently as the 1930s, it wasn't entirely fixed what a standard concert pitch was. Orchestras too, very variable. Even now, Montreal Symphony plays at 442 and the TSO plays at 440. So even modern orchestra pitch isn't entirely standard everywhere. European orchestras, some of them are playing high as 443. Vienna plays very high now. So yeah, so it's a very interesting question. Yeah, no. different styles. Yeah, no, some of the modern orchestras are pushing it upwards now. Yeah, and again, with an instrument like this, you wouldn't think that 2 hertz either way is a big deal. But if you think about these 32-foot pipes, how much bigger a pipe has to be to go down to 436 when it's 32 feet long? That's a huge amount of material on the pipe bodies. So you can't probably easily just tune down that much if it's been tuned slightly higher. So it's a fascinating question. And in terms of tuning systems and tuning temperament, this is equal temperament and always has been. In terms of a lot of the European instruments, though, in the 17th century, pretty much everywhere, mean tone tuning was the standard, where there were pure major thirds, or 2 out of every 3 major thirds were pure, and the other one was a wolf, so to speak. So C to E would be pure, E to G sharp would be pure, but then G sharp to C would be unusably wide. And the same thing for the other ones. And that was the case in England until well into the 19th century. The English were very old-fashioned and stubborn and resistant to change, so they hung on to their mean tone for a very, very long time, much longer than you would expect. But anyway, I won't torture anybody with news about temperaments because that's a whole other thing. It's a fascinating one. Any other questions? Good. Well, thank you very much for coming. If you'd like to try a few notes, feel free. Thank you. Pleasure.
Good evening, Metropolitan United Church. The time is now 4:58. The church will be closing at 5 p.m. Thank you all very much for coming out and visiting with us this weekend, and we would be very thrilled to see you any Sunday morning. Have a wonderful rest of your day.